Do you ever need to take a break from your routine? Well, I know I do right now. I've got my regular work and everything else going on for the rest of this week, but tonight and tomorrow night, I'm staying here at a state park near where I live. So I'll sleep out here in my tent, and then I'll make the drive in to work, do everything I normally do, come back here, stay again, and head to work the next day after that. Might sound a little goofy, but I just need a little break from my routine, and it's nice to sleep uh, out in the woods, out someplace quiet, and just do something different. Shake it up a little bit. Help me just kind of get more reinvigorated. And on this trip, I'm going to showcase my Hilleberg. This is a Kaitum 3 GT, which means it's a 3-person tent, and the GT means it has an extended vestibule. So I'll set that up over here, and I'll show you all the details that I can about it. It's one of my favorite tents for sure. First step in the setup process is to roll the whole thing out. And then what I'll do is I'll put in one stake on either side of this end. Then I'll take the poles, and I happen to have 2 sets of poles, and I'll extend them out and interlock them together. They use an elastic shock cord. They come together just like that. This is how I feed the poles into the sleeves. You start with one or both, and all you have to do is slide it into the sleeve, and then start pulling all the excess over on top of the pole. It's not so much trying to shove the pole down the sleeve because that tends to get stuck. Once it's all the way in the bottom, keep a pocket there. Then you can take all this excess and work it over the pole. Then you lock the end piece into the cup, grab the strap and the adjustable strap, tighten them. That's one pair. Then you just work your way down. Once all the poles are locked into the sleeves, you're going to look something like this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk to the opposite end of the tent where there's 2 more stake rings, just like up here. I'm going to grab them, loft up the tent to get air into it, and stick these 2 stakes into the ground. At this point, the tent is essentially set up, and you wouldn't have to do anything else if you didn't want to, but I want to. So I'll show you the rest of the features. Now we're talking. Look at that. So what did I do here? Well, there's a total of 8 stations that look just like this, where you have a webbing loop and another webbing loop that are sewn in with the sleeve that the poles are in. They go down to some cordage with adjustable line lock components. And what you do is you put a tent peg there and tighten those up. And additionally, there's a webbing loop down here. You put a tent peg in there. There's 8 different locations with that configuration. 4 on this side and 4 on the opposite side. So the effect is that when you apply tension to the cordage, you have opposite tension on the other side and a very strong hoop. So the result is a very much in place tent, very much tied to the ground. The cordage loops at the ends, Hilleberg advises that you actually pull them away from the tent a little bit like this, such that if this end was in the direction of the wind, you'd have a little bit of counterbalance to that force. And then the middle sections can come out more or less in line with the poles. So that's just one aspect. The other aspect is that at either end of the tent vestibule, there's a hoop here with some malleable wire, and cordage is attached to here. So that distributes a load and lets you pull on the tent in this direction. And that goes down to another adjustable line lock and another tent peg. So in effect, just about everywhere that you could imagine, this tent is pegged to the ground right at its base, and there's tension applied at the tent pole hoop. A lot of tension in a good way. That keeps the thing very taut. Then, once everything's set, you can also come in here and adjust these to be taut. The effect is that if there's high wind, because everything's taut and the force is distributed so well, you should not get a lot of whipping around. And when tent fabric whips around, it kind of looks like the way the end of a flag does. And, that whip action really increases the stress on the seams and fabric in a dynamic way that can overcome and result in rips and tears. But that won't happen with this design, assuming you set it up properly. So as I mentioned, this is the GT model, which means that towards the head end, you actually get a very large vestibule. And there are so many different ways you can configure this. Right now I have sort of the main door unzipped and then rolled up and fastened here. But you can also unzip this other region right here, roll it up and fasten it here. Or you could undo this and continue rolling it over here. Or if you really wanted to, you can actually take out that peg as well. And this whole region here can roll up, and you essentially would have like a front porch. The foot end of the tent has a vestibule that is basically like the front, but smaller. And if you did not have the GT model, this is essentially what you would have at both ends. But this is also a situation where you can take the tent pegs out and roll it up or furl it up here for more breathability if you really want to. So this could be the end of the tent. Now, you'd have to be in some pretty benign conditions to do that, but if you did, you'd be able to have a lot of great airflow moving through the tunnel of the tent. In my case, I do expect some rain, so I'm going to keep my vestibules installed as such. But what I will do tonight is I will unzip these right here. One of these is at either end of the vestibule, and that allows you to get airflow directly through that hood region. You can roll this up and fasten it here, the toggle and the elastic band. technically, this right here is considered breathable, but it's more of a gesture. If you were to actually put your mouth up here and try to blow air through, very little would go. But it is still a way that you could have everything zipped up and get a little bit of airflow that you would not get through the steel nylon. I should also mention that I have the ground sheet with this model, and I highly recommend that. So everything stays installed together. The main outer fly, the ground sheet, and the inner tent. And there's a whole system of toggles like this that allow everything to stay affixed. The inner tent is like this. So on down the tunnel there you have toggles and loops. And everything stays together. That way when I take it home and dry it out, I hang it up, everything's expanded and dries out. I can roll it up for the next trip, and then all you have to do is unfurl it and everything's together. The Hilleberg has so many good thoughts put into it too. For example, these cords right here go from the left side all the way to the right side, and you can sort of adjust those as need be, such that on the outside, when you're pulling the loops and putting in your stakes, you don't expand the width of the tent too far, such that you're putting a bunch of tension on the ground tarp or the inner tent. So these are kind of like a limiter, and that's a really great feature. I actually need to put this toggle back in here. Of course, all the zippers feature this rubberized coating, and that's what keeps water out of the zippers. And then we've got the main portion of the tent. So all of this can be furled up and stowed if you need to. And you have access to your inner tent, where there is a very durable bathtub with taped seams and a breathable ripstop mesh. Excuse me, not a mesh, but a breathable ripstop material. A little bit of a cordage there for hanging things. Some pockets in the corners. And then the same type of cover at the other end. Now, these feature 2 layers. There is more of that breathable ripstop and then some mesh. So this is for snowdrift. That way, if you were using this in truly snowy winter conditions and you zipped it up, you'd be able to keep anything, snow or dust, out of your tent. But it's pretty warm right now, so what I'm going to be doing tonight is unzipping the inner section so that I have mesh and get all that airflow through. So if you do unzip the ripstop and you're dealing with just the mesh, this is what you would see. You can see that's a huge semicircular oval type region that you're getting a ton of airflow through. And once again, these Hilleberg tents, they really do pay attention to the details, because what you can do is you roll this up and they provide you with a hook and a piece of elastic to keep that ripstop section nice and tidy. And then inside, well, it's nice. Very breathable, very comfortable. The yellow is great. Mood booster, if you will. And this is the 3-person, because in reality, I use this as a 2-person. And so if you get 2 wide sleeping pads in here, that means there's a great space in between for basically getting in and out of the tent or doing anything that you need to do instead of being right on top of each other. I should mention too, I was talking about these limiters that are on the side to side. There's also a type of limiter for the vestibule regions, because this is actually part of the outer tent structure, but that means if you have it unzipped, you kind of have taken that out of the mix. And so these regions are staked, but this helps control the space between them. There's another really great thought that Hilleberg has put into this, which is that at either end where you have this hood, there's actually a toggle and a loop. Now, what that does is it means that the stress that would be induced on the tent through this cordage transfers to the sleeve, not to the zipper. That way, if you really want to, yes, you can unzip further. But if you didn't have that toggle, if there were high winds pulling on the cordage, all that load would be transferred directly into your zipper. And that is not a strong suit for a zipper. So that's just another very thoughtful design point. And this is what you get with a long, wide sleeping pad. You can see how there's still several inches of space from the head, and there's the same amount down by the feet. And because the tunnel tent end walls are going to be vertical, that's really all the space. You really get that. So I have to say, for tall people such as myself, this is a great tent for that. And if you have wide shoulders, you can see how there's plenty of space for a second person and room in between for functionality. The height is such that you can basically sit up and still have some headroom, but you won't exactly be doing much more than sitting up or kneeling, certainly not standing. Additionally, it is wider up to this point, about halfway down, and then there's a taper towards the feet. So earlier when you heard me talking about the head and the foot section of the tent, there really is a direction. Now, I guess if you're really narrow, it might not matter to you, but for me, wider shoulders, I use the orientation that the tent has. And it kind of makes sense because that vestibule down there is smaller and the one up here is larger. Well, after getting all that technical tent talk out of the way, the only thing left to do for this evening is enjoy the fire and a nice local beer. I like this one quite a lot, and Pilsners in general. In addition to that, this fire was brought to you by organic, free-range, no hormone, etc. firewood. I've been assured that it's really the only thing you should be burning. Nah, I'm just kidding. But it was more convenient than carting out a bunch of my own this time. There's the Hilleberg over there, stout as ever. It's about 10 minutes to sunset, and it's just about as peaceful as can be. It's about 75 degrees, slightly breezy. Just a great night. All right, good morning. Well, everything passed pretty uneventfully last night. I slept okay. It was nice and warm. I think it was a low of something in the 60s, so no big deal. I'm basically glamping. We got a breakfast burrito and a coffee on the way to work. All right, let's do this. Well, that would be why I'm gonna have to cut this trip short. I'll talk to you in a little bit. Well, while I was out finishing up the workday and going to the gym and everything, a pretty strong storm came through here, and there's a whole lot more predicted tonight. It's not too bad, but right now anyway, but it's definitely knocking limbs and branches off trees, and they're predicting baseball-sized hail. And as good as a Hilleberg is, it's still a tent, and I don't want to weather that in baseball-sized hail. Not on purpose, anyway. If I was caught out in the wilderness, that'd be a different story. So, I'm gonna have to cut this trip short. But, nevertheless, Hilleberg stays watertight. Thanks for watching.